Hey, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I have a mega business episode for you today. This is a topic that we have not tackled on the podcast before, which is kind of interesting. It's been many years of the testing psychologist, many business conversations, but we have never talked about selling a practice. So went out and found the best possible person to talk about this. My guest today is Dr. Carrie Sanger. She's a clinical psychologist and owner of Orchard Mental Health Group, which has 165 clinicians in 10 locations throughout Maryland. She has a particular interest in the intersection of business and technology and mental health. She regularly mentors and speaks about parity and regulatory challenges in the industry, AI threats and opportunities, financial literacy for practice owners, and exit planning strategies. So she was perfect person to talk about this. She also runs the Mental Health Mergers and Acquisitions Facebook group, which we will link in the show notes and talk about during the episode. But we try to cover, a nice broad base of material for what it might look like to sell or take on a financial partner in your practice. So we talk about like first steps in that process, how you might be ready, both financially and emotionally. We talk about the different options for selling. We talk about the documents and processes you might need to have in place. We talk about the people you need on your team. This is a really rich discussion for really anyone out there who might be considering selling or taking on a partner in your practice. So you'll hear Carrie talk about how we really need to be thinking 2 to 3 years down the road, because it can take that long sometimes to get the house in order, so to speak, and be attractive to a buyer. So if you're in that boat, this one's for you. Without further ado, I'll give you my conversation with Dr. Carrie Sanger. Carrie, hey, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jeremy. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to meet you too. Yeah, you're in like this somewhat large, but really probably small group of people that I would call like online friends, like where we're in the consulting world, but, share some Facebook group membership. And I think we've messaged back and forth a few times over the years. But yeah, it's good to meet you in person and have you here to talk about a topic that I think is pretty relevant for many people out there. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I feel like I've met most of my professional peers online, which is kind of strange, but
Mhm.
exciting too to get to hear perspectives from all over the world.
Yeah, I know. It really is kind of a gift, online and social media and all that stuff can be weird in a lot of ways, but this is one place that I'm really grateful for. I have a lot of quote unquote online friends that have turned into real friends. Yeah. So nice to connect with you.
I went on a group retreat and we were all going to get matching t-shirts that said we met online just to make people feel really nervous.
I love that. It's so true though. It's so true. Yes. Oh, I'm gonna totally go off script right from the beginning. And what is this group practice owner retreat? There aren't many of those.
Yeah, we egotistically call ourselves the group practice pros. So it's kind of a spinoff. There's a lot of communities built towards solo practice owners and kind of people who are
Hmm.
dipping a toe and developing a group. But then there's some large group practice owners who don't really feel like they have other people who they can talk to about like other issues that happen when you're scaling. So
Hmm.
we kind of splintered off. And for people who have like around like 50 or so employees, we meet monthly online and then an annual retreat.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I know there are so many stages of practice ownership, and people say like large group or medium group and kind of throw those terms around loosely. But yeah, I feel like it's pretty rare to find y'all, who are like 50 plus or 100 plus, especially. So back on script, I suppose, let's talk about, selling a practice. First of all, why do you personally care about this? Why is this important to you right now?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's like a passion project, but I feel like it's an area of kind of knowledge gap. I mean, I think a lot of mental health
Hmm.
professionals don't get business training at all, of course, in school of how to
Hmm.
run a practice. But then certainly when it comes to talking to people who might want to invest or buy a practice, when I had during the pandemic, I started to have these companies like Lifestance and Refresh and others that would start sending me like emails like, we want to talk to you. We like what you're growing. I guess I'm not even sure how they found me. I think they poach like Psychology Today and other ways. And then they think how many providers are at that address. And then they start to target people. And I was like, no, no, no. This sounds like a hoax. I don't even know who these people are. But then, like, the more that we're asking, I was like, wow, maybe I actually have something valuable. Like maybe I should entertain some of these conversations. Maybe I should get knowledgeable about what the process entails. And when I started to look online, there was like no information, not just mental health specific, but even just like healthcare practice sales specific, which you think would kind of be a big thing. Cause I feel like, doctors have been selling to hospital systems and getting rolled up, for like a decade now at least. There really wasn't a lot of good guidance. And the only guidance that was out there was from people who had a stake. So like brokers or buyers, and they're like, yeah, your business is
Mm.
worth 1 times your profit, like propaganda to kind of make you think that you didn't have something important. So just taking it, speaking to different people in the know, having them take a look at my practice and what it might be really worth, asking them a lot of questions, reading what I could, you know, taking auditing MBA courses. I took like a UPenn private equity like online course to try to like figure out the lingo. And ultimately, I decided that I didn't want to sell fully, but I did. I was interested in having some extra investment in my practice to be able to scale and reach our goals and to look into acquiring other practices for growth because there was some labor shortages at the time, and even just like marketing, having strength in numbers. So I got interested in the concept and I just felt like there was like a hole that needed to be filled with like this knowledge gap. And so I started this Facebook group called Mergers and Acquisitions for Mental Health Professionals. So basically for group practice owners. And I was like, well, nobody's probably going to really care about this. But now we have like 2,000 members and people are really interested. Maybe they're not looking to sell tomorrow, but I think any business owner should have an exit plan in mind and what that could look like. I mean, because I think historically, I thought nobody even would want to buy my practice. Like sometimes I'm like, why would you want to inherit this shit show? But run well and profitably, any business can be sold and it's worth what someone is willing to pay for it. So how to position it to have the most value, to have the most interest, to kind of create like a 5 or 10 year plan that would help me get to the exit. And that's what I help other practice owners do too. They come in and they're confused. They don't really know how to read their profit and loss statements. Sometimes they don't even have a bookkeeper. They're not using QuickBooks. They look at great reports from their EHR about finance and stuff. So they really it's very hard for them to comprehend their value or how they might be able to connect with colleagues who might want to, partner with them to help them with their business. So there's so many options out there. It doesn't even have to be a sale. It could be just different strategic partnerships. I think it's just interesting to think about because we see so much like consolidation within mental health, all these different roll-ups happening. And I think private equity has become like a dirty word. If it's not through buying practices, it's through like the Headways and Almas and Talkspace
Hmm.
and Better Helps of the world. Just like a lot of distrust of like, where is the field heading? You don't want to be like Blockbuster in a Netflix world. Like, but there are some options and we have something that people want, mental health in good times, in bad economies, like it's always needed. So I think investors see that as a very durable asset.
I love, there's so many directions that we can go with this conversation just from all of that. I mean, first of all, just I'm glad that you are occupying this space as a consultant. It's funny. We all have our little niches, in the consulting world, and this is a really valuable space. So yeah, I was really glad to find that group, even though I'm not certainly considering selling at this point or anything. It's just like introducing and kind of planting that seed of this business is valuable and there are people out there who can help you with the process.
And
It's
people
great to
are
have that
maybe a little
resource.
hesitant to join the group, but I'll say everybody posts anonymously for the most part. So it's
Yeah,
just people usually asking questions or sharing their experiences. I think people sometimes they don't chime in or comment, but I know that they're reading things and taking it in.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people do. Yeah, my Facebook group is the same. There are a lot of lurkers, readers, not posters. Anyway, so yeah, lots of directions we could go. Maybe we start, I guess, just with basic info. Let's talk about the ways that you could quote unquote sell a practice. There are different ways to go about this, right? And I'd love to just get an overview of what is out there.
Sure. I mean, the sky's the limit with different people who might be interested, but typically speaking, sometimes I've seen people try to sell to their employees, which sounds good in theory. You're going to have the people who already love working there, who know how it goes, who hopefully share your values running it. But a lot of times I find that people join group practice because they don't like the business aspects of it. So if you're trying to give a
Hmm.
share to every single employee, like that gets a little bit messy, but there is a company called Project Equity that you can look into that will help you structure that. Like legally, there's a way you have to kind of structure it. Of
Hmm.
course, they take pretty hefty fee to help you set that up. Sometimes people will just choose, like, say, like a clinical director or one or two trusted people on their team who might be interested. And maybe those people go take out like a SBA loan and they buy out the owner either in one chunk or kind of over time from the continued profits of the business. Then there could be selling to a colleague who has a similar group practice model who might benefit from incorporating yours. Maybe they're having trouble scaling in the area, they could benefit from your client list, the expertise of your staff. Maybe they're a practice that doesn't offer testing. Maybe they're therapy and medication providers. And so this would be a great add on. And then if your practice is profitable enough that it might be considered even by like an institutional investor or kind of the private equity route, most people then would choose to get a broker to have a valuation done. And then there's kind of a process. They develop a marketing prospectus and they send out kind of like an anonymous teaser to everybody in their database. If anybody's interested, there's like a deadline and then they have to sign a non-disclosure. And then they might access like 3 years of the financials of your business. And they can decide like, is this business the size that we're looking for? And then from there that you kind of whittle down the list and meet with the people who are the most serious, who are willing to give the best offers. And there's lots of different chains of like, they need to give you this document and that document. And then they want to review so many things about your business: insurance audit history, 3 years of the profit and loss and tax statements, what technologies do you use, who are your referral partnerships. They're going to want to audit your billing and coding, sample some of your notes, make sure that they're compliant. And so it's a pretty in-depth, time-consuming process, but the payoffs can be more. So it just depends on what route you want to go. If money is the primary thing that's going to drive it, or if it's just feeling like you have it in somebody's hands who's like-minded, who you really trust. Hopefully you can find both in the same package.
Yeah, there's even a lot to pick apart there. I mean, so just big picture, we can think about, okay, we could sell to peer, essentially, like someone, an employee or maybe a colleague around town. That's sort of like the homegrown, I don't know, organic version, maybe. And then there's the like private equity or private funding version that seems a lot more formal and rigorous, but potentially more profitable as well. And then within, gosh, I have so many questions, Carrie. Let's back up because I'm guessing people are wondering about who can actually sell. So I see this question come up a lot in your Facebook group. Um, hey, I have, two practitioners who are part-time contractors and, we take insurance and it's all online. Like, can I sell my practice? And then all the way up to like, I have 100 clinicians and we have this amount of EBITDA and like, it's super detailed. Can I sell my practice? So what have you seen on the continuum of like what practice is sellable?
I'll tell you on the perspective of being a buyer now looking to acquire other practices, like it
Hmm.
needs to be something that would be hard for me to go out and build in a period of 6 months to a year. So if I can
Mm.
put up an ad on Indeed or LinkedIn and hire three new therapists in the next 3 months, why am I going to pay you
Hmm.
a couple $100,000 to take your three who might quit after the deal anyway? So it needs to
Hmm.
be something that's they can sink their teeth into that would be hard to build, but everybody feels like their business is their baby. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It's the best thing I've ever done. And somebody else must feel that way. And it's like, well, I've surveyed like hundreds of businesses now, and yours is actually not that profitable. Like, and I find that a lot of times practice owners, they're pocketing less than when they were in solo practice because there's so many additional expenses of running a business that you have to hit a certain scale before there really is even profit.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any like rule of thumb or even like ballpark number that we should be like, where would you say, hey, I can't build this in 6 to 12 months? Are we talking like, is it a specialty within the practice? Is it like a number of clinicians? Is it an income target?
That's hard because every buyer might be looking for something different. I mean, even if they've done acquisitions in your area, they might be looking to do what they call like a tuck in. Like, here's a complementary practice that would add services or scale or staffing that we don't really currently have. So it might be worth it just for like the services you offer. Like, if you have a niche or a specialty that they don't have. But I mean, for me personally, I'm not really interested in a business that probably has less than $250,000 of profit a year because that is something that takes a lot of time to grow and develop, on your own. But other buyers might have different feelings. If it was like a colleague
Hmm.
or something, they might be more interested in it. But like a solo practitioner who's retiring, that to me really doesn't have a lot of value because the value is in the provider delivering the services. So if you're not
Hmm.
leaving behind many providers, then there's really not much value.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, very pointed question. Where does testing fit into this landscape? Like, what are you seeing as far as testing practices being attractive to buyers?
Yeah, any profitable business can be sold. I think there's some education needed to help people even understand what testing is. I think a lot of people think, like I said before, it's just like, oh, why can't like a psychiatrist give a Connors? Isn't that an ADHD evaluation? Lots of places do that. And they're like, no, it's like a objective process. It's really in depth. It takes a lot of hours. And some buyers exclusively only want to consider insurance based practices, which sounds counterintuitive because in our field, self pay is usually like the pinnacle of doing good
Hmm.
business. But sometimes they see self pay practices as a little bit harder to market, sometimes a little bit more attached to kind of the owner's branding. In the insurance pay practices, it can be a little tough though to make the margin to be able to scale the testing practice to have it ready for sale. So it's kind of hard. It's like, which approach do you take? So sometimes if you have a blend of other services you're offering, like if you're also offering therapy, or we have like nurse practitioners that do medication management, like they see that as like kind of easier to understand. You're like a one-stop shop kind of clinic, if you will.
Hmm.
But again, anything's profitable. I mean, if you say like, we do neuropsych testing for ADHD and autism, I think most people are like, oh yeah, that sounds like important. Like, yeah, that's hot right now. Like, oh, everybody has ADHD and autism. We need to get on that bandwagon. They do go through cycles of like different diagnoses they're really interested in backing. Like substance abuse treatment centers were really hot for like 5 to 10 years. And then eating disorder
Yeah.
clinics. And then in the last 5 years, it was like ABA clinics. And so now there has been like
Yes.
a little bit of a shift to outpatient mental health, but I think if you have a niche, it usually speaks to them if they understand the terms you're throwing around.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate that insight. I do see these trends, I think, in Facebook groups and so forth, what's getting bought and what's not getting bought. I keep hearing, though, about the state of the market, so to speak, and whether mental health practices are still attractive to, let's just stick with private equity for now. What are you seeing as far as trends in terms of, increased acquisitions, decreased acquisitions? What's that look like?
Yeah, I think the biggest years for acquisitions in our field for outpatient mental health or like 2021, 2022, 2023. That was like the boom of COVID and a lot of investor interest flooded the space. And then it seemed like a lot of the larger practices had already been acquired. And so then like did investors want to have to go and like pull together a lot of smaller practices? Like that's a lot more management and kind of overhead and
Hmm.
resources. Because typically private equity, they have like a mandate. They're only looking at businesses that have more than $1 million in profit or $2 million in profit, five, 10. Like they have different benchmarks. And a lot of mental health practices, a lot of businesses in general, never hit $1 million in revenue, never mind $1 million in profit. So
Hmm.
finding the right people, which sometimes means people who are jumping to the field for the first time, that maybe they've built businesses in other industries before and they want to work with maybe a leader who wants to stay on and just take some of the financial risk off of them. I have a colleague who sold self-pay practice, and the buyer took out a $5 million SBA loan. That's like the max you can take out, and they were willing to help them like with technology and like business structure, like employee management. And they're like, oh, this is great. I can take some chips off the table, de-risk my future, have like a partner to help me with things. So it can work.
Okay. Good to hear. Good to hear. I really want to tackle this question of when is the right time to sell. So I'm trying to work through this in like a logical, sort of chronological way. I know it's not always that clear and distinct, but for me, one of the first steps might be like, when is the right time? And again, I see this question come up a lot, like, should I sell now or should I wait for 2 years? Or so how do you think about the right time?
And I think that's a very individualized answer, like making any decision. There's so many different inflection points. I think some people, though, they get in this feeling of burnout and desperation, and they just want somebody to take it. Like, I don't want to have to deal with this. Like, if I could pass it over tomorrow,
Yeah.
I would. Maybe it hasn't been profitable. They feel like it's not a rewarding employee experience. They're working more hours than they ever did before, having less time with their family. They thought having a practice would be like passive income, and it hasn't materialized to be that. Feel like that. I would say it's not good to sell from a place of desperation. Try to get some business coaching. Maybe you're not, maybe I worked with an executive coach for a long time. He was like, do you have any SOPs or KPIs? And I was like, what's that word salad? Figuring like, that is standardized operating procedures. Everybody knows what they're doing and knows how to do it. So they can do it even if I need to take a vacation. And KPIs, key performance indicators. Like, what are the expectations for each role? How will we know if each person is successful or not? And be able to give them feedback, which sounds scary and corporate and all that. But if you are going to scale and have a lot of staff, a lot of clients, you need to have some standardization in place. So don't sell from a place of desperation. But sometimes I've seen people, they're ready to retire. They maybe have had like a health issue in the family. They really need to take a step back. Or if it's like financially motivated, looking at the interest rate environment and, sell when you have an offer in hand. That's my best
Mm.
advice. Like if somebody comes to you and is willing to give you a fair amount for your business, like to say, "Oh, I don't know, will I have regrets?" Like I don't really meet many people who have regrets because on the other side, when there's less stress, or if you still want to stay involved and you don't want to, fade off into the sunset in your rocking chair quite yet, most buyers want you to stick around and be involved because most of the time they don't know how to run your business as well as you do. So usually I would say to people, start thinking about selling 2 to 3 years before you're even really ready to, because you might have to stay around for 3 to 5 years.
Such a good point. Yeah, I want to pin that and talk about that more in just a second. But I'm going to ask a question from something you said previously around people being burnt out and the practice not being profitable and they just want to offload it. So, again, this question comes up a lot. I feel like I'm just like parroting your Facebook group, but bringing it to the public. So, the question is like, is a non profitable or barely profitable practice sellable?
No, sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Because
Moving on.
if you
No, tell me about it.
you couldn't make it work with all of your blood, sweat, and tears, it's going to be really hard for somebody else to make it work. And usually or what they call your valuation. So, what your business is worth is a multiple of the profitability of your company. So, let's say 3 to 5x for practices under $500,000 of profit. If your profit is $20,000, I guess you could find somebody willing to buy your practice for maybe $60 to $100,000. But after you pay taxes on that, like it's really not leaving a lot behind. Again, it's probably not a lot for a buyer to sink their teeth into. So, it's not to put down what you've built. It's just, for buyers, it's not really getting them excited.
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know. So I'm going to highlight one of the things you said, which is just like if you're in that place of feeling burnt out and like you just want to unload it, it's a great time for business coaching and try to get things tightened up and, work toward a different scenario
And
where you
I
are.
will say, and this sounds like backwards, but some people like they're like, you know what, group practice ownership is not for me. I took a chance. We had so many clients that needed care. I hired these people, but I really don't enjoy being a manager. I stay up at night worrying about, well, I have enough money for payroll. Like it's impacting my mental health. And it's okay to close down your practice. Like I've seen a lot of people
Mm,
do that this year. Like
mm,
reimbursements are sometimes going down. There's threats to like Medicare and Medicaid eligibility. It's harder to hire people.
right.
Like inflation has costs of everything going up, rent, utilities. Like it is harder to make a margin. And it's okay to say, I tried. Okay, staff, you take your clients, you can rent space from me if you want, but we're going to be wrapping this up. So I do want to put that out there. I don't see that as a failure. I think it's just listening to what you personally need.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I think we went through a big right sizing, as they call it. So I don't know. I don't think we've talked about this by any means, but we scaled down from probably 45 people to 15 or 18 purposefully. And it was a great decision, but it was also like a lot of wrestling with that. Am I a failure? Why couldn't I make this work? Why couldn't I take it to the next level? So it's just validating to hear you say that and to even take it further and say like, hey, you can shut down your practice. That's just the decision you're making. And hopefully it's the best decision for you and for your people. There's no shame in that. I'm guessing some people out there need to hear it.
I think some people get, even the best of us get competitive. Like whatever we do, we want to do it well.
Oh yeah. Of course. Of course. Yeah. It's all or nothing. It's either like wild success or total failure. But there's something in the middle. Yeah. So, okay. So maybe somebody's thinking about this. We've got our options. There's like the homegrown, peer thing. There's like private equity. What would you say are some of the first, like, just first steps in going down this path for someone?
If you don't have a bookkeeper and you're not using QuickBooks or something similar, you should start. Because when somebody asks you for your financials and you give a 2-page printout from the EHR, they're not going to think you have a very like solid, stable business
Yeah.
model.
Yeah.
And having somebody explain what that means to you, like what are overhead costs? What goes into that category? Staff costs. Like what about payroll taxes? Like take home pay. Like looking back, like sometimes there's like what they call like adjustments to EBITDA. EBITDA is basically a fancy word for EB, I forget, before taxes and depreciation and
Hmm.
amortization, whatever the heck that is. So like before you pay income taxes and what's left over, like how much is there in the account that would be able to be assumed by a new owner? So say your practice this year did $100,000 in profit. They want to make sure that next year there's going to be at least that amount of money available to them. So if you like bought a car for the business, or you had your kids on payroll, or a lot of the profit was from your personal clinical work, whatever it might be, or you bought like $50,000 of office furniture, something that's not going to be an ongoing repetitive expense. So you're going to add those things
Hmm.
back to the bottom line and try to create like a future forecast. Maybe you have 5 new staff that you're hiring that are in the pipeline that you know are going to add revenue, but they're just not up to their caseload yet. They're waiting on credentialing, whatever it is. So you're going to put together, the narrative, I guess, that you're going to be presenting to buyers. You're going to be trying to maximize your value. So getting all your ducks in a row. And then from there, if you think that you might have a business that could be attractive to private equity and you need more guidance, a lot of brokers will give you a free valuation. So you take those documents you pulled together to them, and they'll look at it honestly. They'll say, in your region, given the current buyer climate and interest rates, this is the multiple of profit that we think that you might be able to fetch. And if you want to work with us, sign this agreement where you're going to pay us probably 5 to 10% of the sales price. So you have to be selling for an amount that makes it worth it to be able to pay the 5 to 10%. So those are usually the initial steps. If you're looking for a peer to buy your practice, it's hard because you don't want to just say, "Hey, county, anybody interested in buying my practice?" Because if people say, "Oh, they're going to tell your staff like they're thinking about selling. You should jump ship and come work for us." And so it's a little
Hmm.
bit of a sticky situation. So I've seen people list their practice themselves on a website called bizbuysell.com, which is like you'll see like
Hmm.
a lot of like frozen yogurt franchises and stuff on there. But hey, you can list any business there, and I look there. So other people sometimes do too for smaller businesses for sale. Or you can even have your lawyer put on their letterhead and send out to your competitors and say, "I have a client in your area, this type of practice about this size revenue looking to potentially sell. Reach out to me if you might be interested." To have a neutral party who kind of does that. And of course, get them to sign a non disclosure.
Of course. And just to make it super clear, why are we doing a non-disclosure?
Oh, because you don't want them to go tell people what you make, and never give them your insurance fee schedules. I learned that one the hard way because those are very protected. And sometimes people will only want to take a look at your practice to see what your fee schedules are, because then they'll go back to insurance and say, "I know you're paying so and so 15% more." People have all different motives for wanting to get to know you. So just be careful.
Hmm. Hmm. So what if we are, and this has happened, for me over the years, I can't even count the number of folks who have reached out and asked to sell, right? So how would one vet these outreaches?
So if you want to buy,
Well, I'm thinking if you are wanting to sell, if someone's reaching out to you and said, like the typical email is like, "Hey, saw your practice profile and it looks like you'd be a great fit for our agency. We're acquiring mental health practices and done all these deals and we could really help you." Say someone is getting those emails, then how do you like comb through those or even know which ones are legit?
yeah, it can be hard. I look them up. I look at their LinkedIn profiles, try to read whatever I can if they have any kind of online reviews or Glassdoor, just to see if are they serious. I mean, that's where a broker can be helpful because they have the knowledge, they have the database and the connections to say like, "Oh, this is a place that cold calls like hundreds of different types of businesses," versus like if it's a buyer whose name you might have heard of, who's done similar deals in the space, then you know that they're at least legit, that they have money. That's important because sometimes people get offers and they don't know until the end of the process when they pay all this in legal fees. Oh, actually, that person can't deliver at the closing because their funding didn't come through. So you need to verify them, not just their reputation, but their funding. So if you're not going to work with a broker, your lawyer, though, can help. It helps to have a lawyer who's well versed in mergers and acquisitions, and they can help you with all those different aspects. And they'll probably put you in
Hmm.
touch if you don't have a CPA who's skilled in that. There are ones that also can help with that process.
Yeah, let's spend a little bit of time just to take a quick detour around the team or the folks who are going to help you through this process. You've mentioned a broker, you've mentioned an attorney. Talk to me about both of those positions and what they do and why we would need them, and then any other folks, professionals that might help in the selling process.
A broker helps you find and vet a buyer. They'll help you with your evaluation and they'll help you with contract negotiations. The lawyer is going to be the one that reviews all the documents to make sure that they're compliant because you might be signing up for things like, we can talk about this later, like rolling your equity or some type of phased earnout or these different concepts that could come back to bite you if they're not structured the right way. Or if you're staying on, you want an employment agreement, or there might be some non compete provisions. You can't open another group practice for 5 years within a 50-mile radius. Like you want to make sure that what you're signing on to is really what reflects your kind of longer term goals. The CPA and your bookkeeper, they're going to be working to help produce a lot of those financial documents that validate that yes, you are worth what you're asking for. And then you're going to need probably likely somebody on your team who can also help you. Like our company had a COO and I would have been lost without her because I don't even know how to pull financial documents anymore. Like she's the one who has like all the insurance records and malpractice policies like in a binder, like, so having somebody on your staff, if it's not you, you don't want to tell everybody that you're considering this, but it helps to loop one person in also because you want somebody to talk to. It can be kind of an isolating process because you're trying to keep it anonymous.
That's such a good point. Yeah, the isolation I could see being very heavy and just the emotional burden, right?
That's also why I'm
That's
here
a
though
lot.
to consult and help people talk things through and understand what's being put in front of them.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, that's good to know. Okay, so we've got our bookkeeper slash accountant, a broker, an attorney, maybe a COO or a financial person slash emotional support person. I'm curious about the broker. This is kind of a black box to me. Like, who is the broker? Is this person like another attorney or like what is a broker? Or is that just their whole job? They're just a broker, like a business person, like an MBA? And how do you find a broker?
I don't know if they all have MBAs, but I Googled behavioral health business broker and I narrowed it down to like, there weren't really a lot of people,
Hmm.
3 main companies. And so I met with each of
Okay.
them. I just felt like I could tell right away the one whose working style I felt the best with. I'll put in a plug for
Hmm.
them. They're called Mertz Taggart. We send a lot of people there because they'll give you a free valuation, whether or not you work with them, which is nice because not everybody will do that. And so they took time. They explained the sales process. Who was involved along the way, what to expect. So that did help a lot. Just somebody who'd been there before, and they don't get paid unless you sell. So they're motivated to help you.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Speaking of getting paid, all these people on your team will presumably want to be paid for the work that they do. So, I think this is super important just to talk explicitly about like how much money you might owe in this whole selling process. So can we tackle, yeah, like what each of these people cost and taxes? I assume you pay taxes when you sell a business. And ultimately, I think the question in people's minds is like, what am I actually going to walk away with? Like if I sell for 1 million, how much of that goes to my bank account? So let's get into that.
Sure. Well, just like a specialist in our field would command more than a generalist. Same thing in the legal field. So an M&A attorney is going to charge probably around $600 an hour. And so you want to be careful how many hours they're billing. So don't ask them a million questions that could be answered by someone else or by ChatGPT, or ask them to put a junior associate on the lower level tasks instead of themselves. The CPA, that really varies. I'd say maybe $300 an hour. And then the broker, like I said, usually gets like a 5 to 10% commission, but sometimes it's like a $200,000 minimum. So you really want to make sure that the sales price dictates that. And then in terms of taxes, you're going to have a federal capital gains tax and then also your state capital gains tax. So some states don't have capital gains tax. I think there's like 5 of those states. People are like, I'm just going to go move there right before my sale. You have to be like an established resident there for a number of years before you sell, and your business like has to be headquartered there. So nice try, but that's pretty tough to do. Um, and then
Hmm.
I think the capital gains tax at the federal level right now is 20%. So all in, you might be looking somewhere between 20 to 30% with the state capital gains tax factored in. So it's considerable. But if you don't
Hmm.
sell, you have to think about future profits, and then the income tax rate might even end up being higher than the capital gains tax rate.
So all in, is there a way to estimate, 20, 30% for capital gains taxes and then the hourly rate for these folks? I know that's going to vary probably significantly from case to case, but I mean, it sounds like, I don't know, it might not be unusual to say 35 to 40% of the selling price is going to come off the top for fees and leave you with the rest. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, if you have 20 to 30% taxes, and then the legal fees, I'd say I'd budget at least probably $50,000. I mean, there's a standard kind of number of hours that it takes to close each deal, whether it's large or small. And the rest of it is just how much do you feel comfortable researching on your own versus asking a professional every time you have a question, which will be multiple times a day, every single day. So just trying to be cautious that they are always on the clock. There are no freebies. Yeah, it depends. If you use the broker, like I said, they take 5 to 10%. So if you do it without, you save that money. So it really depends on your sale price. So it needs to be something that is going to meet your financial needs. And it helped for me to talk to a financial planner who was specialized in exit planning. And they helped me look at what is your freedom threshold. And they did a lifetime capital needs planning assessment, which involves some Monte Carlo simulation of interest rate projections over the next 50 years and what the cost of college for my kids might be when they're ready to be college bound. And they came up with a number and they said, you need this after taxes. So, like, if you never want to have to work again, if you want to keep working, then you need less. So that helps. Like, what numbers should I be striving for that makes sense for me?
I love you just threw out a lot of terms that I'm sure people are like, what in the world
Well, I
just
don't know what
happened?
they mean.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, who does? Who does, right? But people can rewind and listen to that whole thing again. But essentially, it sounds like you just talk to a financial planner who will run a bunch of scenarios and figure out exactly how much money you need and use that as your
But a lot of
goal.
people are not hoping to be able to sell for a place that they never have to work again. Maybe they just want to pivot and go
Hmm.
back to solo practice and have something in their pocket that reflects the years of work and risk that they took on, which is fine too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So that leads to, I guess, another set of questions just around what happens after the sale for folks. So there's maybe we talk about staying on or not staying on. I see this question come up a lot as well. Like, I just want to sell this practice and walk away. How common is that versus times when buyers want the owner to stay on for?
Well, if you're selling to private equity, I'd say it's not common because they don't usually have somebody waiting in the wings to come in and take over, somebody who has clinician and business knowledge. And even like to avoid corporate practice of medicine law, they have to structure it in a way that some clinician is still in charge of the clinical practice because it's not allowed for a corporation to own a healthcare business. So if it's not
Hmm.
you, it needs to be somebody who can run a healthcare practice, which could really be any clinician. So it helps if you have a clinical director or somebody that you're grooming eventually to kind of move into that role that you can trust.
Cool.
But if you're selling to a colleague or to your employees, you might assume that they have some base level knowledge of how to run a healthcare services practice. Maybe not as much your employees. So in that case, I would suggest starting to train someone over time to shadow you, gradually giving them more and more of the tasks that you would have done to see, do they like it? Can they do it? And so to have kind of a transition plan in place. But I think a lot of people do sign like a 3 to 5 year employment agreement where they have equity that they've left on the table, so rolled equity. So a certain percentage of the sale was in cash and a certain part was in equity or rather shares. So the goal is as they hopefully acquire other businesses and then eventually resell all those bundled businesses that they'll sell for a higher amount than you did. And so that your equity shares might end up even being more than what your initial chunk of cash was. But that could be a multi-year process that might involve a lot of variables that you can't really influence. So I always advise people to try to get as much upfront as you can because you really don't know what the future will hold. And a lot of people who want to leave the practice or because they do worry about financial uncertainties in the future for mental health care practice owners.
Right, right. So I want to make sure I'm understanding. It sounds like whatever happened, whether you do the rolled equity or not, most buyers will want you to stay on for 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years for as a transition.
Yeah.
Is that
Although they
fair?
can't really force you for the most part. But sometimes it's like if you quit before your time is up, you won't get your equity cashed out or whatever it is. And they'll put you on a
Hmm.
salary. Like you can negotiate all of that.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, yeah, does you staying on, does that influence the sell price
I think you can because if they don't have somebody who can replace you, they need to budget what would it cost to hire the CEO for this company. And it's
and train?
probably more than you've even been paying yourself.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. So then tell me again, maybe I'll just summarize the rolled equity concept and see if I'm on the right track with it. So it's essentially like, let's say, theoretically you could sell your practice for $1 million. I'll just stick with that nice round number. But rolling equity is essentially you say, oh, I'm going to actually sell it for 500,000 and put 500 grand back into this new entity, this new business that my practice now is
Sort
in
of.
hopes.
Yeah. You should never roll 50% equity. That's not good. You shouldn't roll more.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
You should never roll probably more than 30% equity. So say at the time of closing then with $1 million business, you get $700,000 in cash and you get $300,000 in shares.
Gotcha. And then the hope is that like the new owners then like buy more practices and the whole thing gets more valuable. And then eventually you like cash out a higher value based on that.
So maybe
Yeah.
today, if your practice is the only one in their portfolio, the share is worth $10, but then they add
Hmm.
five other practices and now it's worth $50 a share.
Yeah, yeah. Let me and you if you can't answer this question, that's okay, but I feel like I've seen, dentist friends of mine, eye doctor friends of mine, other professions, not mental health, but other professions do a rolled equity model and it has not gone well. I'm curious just from what you've seen in the mental health landscape, is that typically a good choice?
I haven't seen anybody who's stuck with it throughout the thing and cashed out and said like, "Oh yeah, that was so much better." I'm sure it
Mm,
exists, but yeah, money today is better than promised money tomorrow, especially if it's a partner you don't know super well. Like you don't know how they run businesses. Like I think, not to trash any particular one because they'll probably accuse me of slander or something, but like Lifestance, they grew really fast. They took on all these businesses, but they didn't really do anything to like improve the insurance reimbursements or the clinician experience. They made people see more clients and they cut their wages. They took away a lot of their support staff and then people quit. And then lo and behold, their equity, their shares, they went down. They had been, on Wall Street. They had gotten so big that they were like over $1 billion company. And now they're at risk of being taken off the stock exchange because they're not that size anymore. So you have to be
mm.
careful who you partner with.
Yes, that I think leads to some questions just around the emotional component of selling, right? And private equity for most of us does not have like a warm and fuzzy sort of vibe. So I don't know. How do you talk people through that process of just like, well, I'm selling to private equity? Like that just sounds gross.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the term sounds gross, but if you meet different people, like they're not all bad people. Like just like your
Hmm.
employees, they think you're bad because you want to have a profitable business. Like, yeah, their business is to make money, but they're not like only focused on that, or else they would go to some other industry like software or tech companies that have much bigger margins. Like if they're interested in
Yeah.
mental health, it's usually because they do care about the cause. It's, not entirely divorced from their mission. So I get to know some people, find somebody who is aligned with your values, at least surface level. The company that we ultimately
Hmm.
decided to invest in, they're not technically private equity. They're called a family office. It's a guy who's worth $8 billion, and he told his kids go out in the world and invest in good causes. So we felt a little bit more
Mm,
mission aligned. And they didn't expect kind of any year over year growth targets for us to hit like some of the other companies we talked to were expecting.
gotcha. Gotcha. And is this, well, presumably this is someone that your broker connected you with?
Yeah, there are so many people out there that you would never find on your own.
That's a good point. Okay, yeah, I wanted to go back to that actually and ask at some point you sort of threw out the possibility or the reality that some folks do this without a broker. Is that legit and would you recommend it?
Only, I mean, because the broker fees and their minimum that they take, and they might not even choose to represent you if they think you're going to sell for less than a certain amount of money. So for most small practice owners, when I say small, I mean probably 10 staff or less. It's not the broker is not going to be interested. Private equity is not going to be interested. Like peer to peer is kind of your best bet, and you're going to have to chase down some of those leads on your own. You're going to have to find online directories or have your lawyer scout people for you, or even
Hmm.
in the Facebook group, people post anonymously. I have a practice for sale in this region. Leave your email address here if you're interested, and I'll reach out to you. I had somebody do that a week or two ago, and they already got like 5 offers from colleagues, and they were really surprised.
Sure, sure. Okay, so it's doable. It is doable. Just complicated. It sounds here it's doable. Let's see. I always hear, again, from friends in other fields, culture is a big thing. We've kind of touched on this a bit, but just from your experience and, selling yourself and talking with other people, what has that looked like post sale? I feel like there are a lot of horror stories out there, but, how do we navigate, culture staying what we want it to be? And if it doesn't, what do we do? There's lots of feelings around that.
Well, when we took on a financial partner in the beginning, nothing really changed for our staff, because we were still running things the way that we had been. But as we started to acquire businesses, that's been tough because we don't, we're clinicians even, but like maybe this other practice has been doing things a certain way that works better for their staff, but makes it really hard to grow the team. You're always battling, I guess, like efficiency versus like keeping clinicians happy. So
Hmm.
like right now, the practice we've acquired, like we have different cancellation policies, we have different PTO policies. Sometimes they're going to have different EHRs, payroll platforms, like, and if you're all trying to get on the same one, that can be tough because it's a lot of change in a short amount of time. And to help staff understand, well, how does this benefit me? and to actually help it benefit them, to be able to give better benefit packages. And now we've been able to hire HR, marketing, finance, IT, things that we couldn't afford before. So now we have like a more sophisticated business, which is hopefully going to generate more referrals and ultimately trickle down into a better clinician experience. But that doesn't happen on day one. The first 6 months are really hard.
Yeah, it seems like that's a given. Change is hard no matter what, and this is a huge change for a lot of practices. So I would
I do
imagine
tell
it's extra
practice owners
hard.
sometimes that are hesitant about selling to maybe an investor type person who's not a clinician themselves. They're like, well, I'm going to sell to my employees because I'll preserve the company. I'm like, and what if they turn around and sell to private equity? Like, you can't always control the future.
Huh? Yeah, it's a good point. Do you have any thoughts around when owners and how owners present a sale to their employees? Like when in the process, and then what do you say?
They always say, never make any announcements until the ink is dry on the deal and you have the money in your account because anything can change, even sometimes up until the last minute. And when you do, usually you're going to work with the buyer to have like something mapped out. You're going to have like a town hall meeting. You're going to have them come out to meet people, or just you personally are going to tell them what's happened. You're going to try to address their concerns. But really, ultimately, it's just time will tell. Like, we think this is a good partnership. You stick around and see if you feel the same. But if you can make nothing change for them in terms of, their pay's not going to go down, their caseload's not going to go up. Nobody's going to be they're still going to report to the same people they used to. Like, that their day to day is not going to change as much as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate you making that really clear. I could see a temptation, just speaking personally, if I was in this situation of like talking with people way ahead of time to try to prepare them and like be kind and like all those things.
Just gotta rip the band-aid. And I think every practice owner feels bad about it. They feel some kind of guilt. I don't know if that would be the same.
Mm,
Like, if like you owned a bank and you were selling a bank, would you feel guilt? I think it's just specific to being mental health providers. Like, we're
mm,
empaths. We want to make sure that we're not impacting anyone negatively. But ultimately, like, if your staff member had the opportunity to have like a life altering financial event, do you think they would think twice about you?
sure, it's a good way to put it. It's a good way to put it. Feels different, but I know where you're headed with that. Yeah, there's a lot to this whole process. So we've talked about a lot of different things. I mean, we could get in the weeds with any number of these questions. Hope was just to provide a big picture overview for folks and, a little bit of a roadmap. Maybe we start to close with your thoughts on, I mean, anything, that people don't anticipate, like hidden experiences, things people might want to be aware of but not know about. Yeah, just that you've run into over the years.
Think, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like, people get really excited to have an offer. They put a lot of time into getting all the documents ready. And then for one reason or another, it doesn't pan out the way they wanted and it doesn't work out. But sometimes it's like, you got to kiss a couple frogs to find your prince. Like, if you just keep going, like, you can find it. I think most people, just like when like freshmen go off to college and like, oh, wait a minute, this is not right. Like, it just takes time to find the right match.
Hmm. Hmm. The whole time we've been talking, I keep having this parallel of buying a house. It feels a lot like buying a house. Like you can, you get different offers, you put in different offers. Maybe they don't go through. You get all excited. You can do it on your own, but maybe you shouldn't. You kind of need a realtor. So there's just a lot of similarities. It seems like to that process.
I mean, a home and a business, those are probably the biggest assets most people are going to have. So it does help, though, I think, to have a professional who's walked the path before, because a lot of people have experience buying and selling houses. Not many people in our field have experience buying and selling businesses.
Right. Right. Such a good point. So let's see. You are post deal, whatever that looks like. Yes. I'm curious what that actually does look like for you these days, just from someone who has done it.
Yeah. Well, I negotiated to stay on like a part time remote primarily capacity. So, which is honestly what I was doing before anyway. We hired a really excellent COO who I was getting 300 emails a day and staying up till 2 a.m. running payroll and like wearing all the hats. And now she does that. And now she's getting overwhelmed and we need to find more support staff. But so I'd already kind of taken a step back from the business. Like, so as much as you can, I think it does help, because if you're so in the business that you're at every single one of your staff members' kids' birthday parties and all that kind of stuff, like, it's going to be really hard to wrap your mind around doing things a different way. So to kind of gradually take things off your plate, take small steps back. Not that you're not caring and involved, but just make yourself less indispensable.
It's good advice. Is there anything you wish you had done differently, having the perspective of hindsight?
Well, I'll say the financial partner that we took on, well, they've been easy to work with and they haven't really rushed to change very much. They also didn't have a ton of mental health experience. So I really thought they were going to be bringing resources to us. And that hasn't really been the case because we were the first one to kind of partner with them. So if
Mhm.
you were looking to really have team members who can share the workload, don't be the first person to partner with someone new. Be an add on to something they've already built.
That's fair. That's fair. This is great. I feel like there's so much just concrete advice and perspective that you shared. Thanks for being here. If people do want to reach out, yeah, and work with you or just find your Facebook group, get some resources, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, on Facebook, the name of the group is Mergers and Acquisitions for Mental Health Professionals. And then I created a website for consulting services called sellyourpractice.com. If you go on there, you can find links to the groups and ways to contact me.
Nice. Nice. That's a great URL.
All of the
I don't know how
URLs related to healthcare practices for sale were open. So I just bought like 60 of them.
good for you. Good for you. That's incredible.
Points to the lack of information, though, that is available online.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I've really enjoyed this. Yeah, it was great to meet you and talk with you after, crossing paths online so many
Thank you.
times.
You
But
too. And good luck to your listeners. I know it's can be tough making those decisions, but I think it is exciting to feel like there's a light at the tunnel and there's rewards for all the hard work.
absolutely. Yeah, I think if nothing else, we've instilled some hope. You have instilled some hope primarily. And it's just good to know that there are resources and folks like yourself who can guide us through that process when the time comes. Yeah, thanks again, Carrie.
Thank you. Take care.